Hi, I'm Charlotte and this is Time Mama Tries to Read. So I haven't had the best reading week compared to last week, but I have finished a book. I've started 2 other books, and one of the books that I'm going to talk about is this one, which you've probably seen all over BookTube. I had it on pre-order because I wanted to be one of the first to read it, but the week has conspired against me. So you know, back in the day I could have finished it in a couple of days easily, but I've been reading it for I think 4 days. Whenever it came out, I've basically been reading it since then, and I am not even on, I think I'm on page 50. I'm on page 60. Wow. Yeah, my child hasn't slept for a very long time. I mean, he hasn't slept ever, but he's really not slept in the last month, and this week has been really bad again, so I'm just running on empty basically. But I finished this and it was amazing. So I talked about it last one, so don't want to talk about it too much this time. But what I will say, which I don't think I went into as deeply last time, is the reason this book is so brilliant is that it includes the voices of her family. So it includes Henrietta's children, who, by the nature of what happened to them in losing their mother and then being brought up in a very poor family situation where they had not so much a stepmother, but a woman who moved into the house with her husband in a really weird way and basically treated them all appallingly. They grew up not having finished their educations. You know, they basically, as adults, are not equipped to understand the legacy that Henrietta has left, and they want to understand, but nobody takes the time to show them until, it seems, Rebecca Skloot comes along, and with her help and help of scientists who thankfully wised up to what's happened before, they do explain to them. But what I love is that she keeps their voices in. So when, for example, when they're talking about why the cells have lasted so long, why they are considered immortal, she includes the science behind it. She talks about viruses having infected the cells, and that in turn has made them very strong. But then she also puts that side by side, and with no preference, she puts forward the opinions of the family, which are things like she had unfinished business on this earth, she loved her children too much to leave them, even voodoo is in there. She doesn't disparage those claims, she just puts them there side by side, and it gives a kind of validity to their voice. It can't, you know, it puts their voice on a par with science, which is what's been needing to happen, and some, you know, since the 50s. So yeah, I love that. I love Deborah's voice coming through. You know, a lot of it's quoted word for word, the conversations that they've had, and it just gives you a sense of the enormous impact that this had on one family. It also just gives you a massive impact on what poverty in America was like at this time for people of colour specifically, but also for anybody who was in that kind of level of poverty. And just the contrast between, there's a great scene in here where she goes to visit the Lax family that are the white side of the family, because the Lax family got their name from a slaveholder who actually biologically is part of their family because he fathered children that then went on to, you know, through the line to Henrietta. So she goes to meet basically Henrietta's cousins who are white, living in sort of basically the family homestead, and it's all very sort of China tea and things like that when she goes there, and they just are in complete denial that they have got any relatives in the town at all. They say, oh, they've got their surname from us because they were on the plantation, and it's just so disturbing. So this, you know, this is living memory. These are people that Rebecca Skloot goes to meet. So yeah, I found the whole thing really eye-opening, and it went into a lot of detail about things that I wasn't expecting it to. Then I have started, but I'm shamefully behind Kate from Happy Occurrences. I've started my Hannah Arendt, The Origins of Totalitarianism, and there's a particular sort of train of thought that's really grabbing me that I wanted to share with you, because it kind of ties in actually with Henrietta Lacks, this idea of how we present history. You know, Henrietta Lacks was in science books, and nobody kind of gave a thought as to who she was. And, you know, we're trying to correct and undo what we did. There's also discussions of slavery in the book. So this is discussing the Holocaust, and there's, you know, one of the main problems that Hannah Arendt seems to be discussing at the moment is the way the Holocaust has been portrayed within history books. So she says here, that we should neither deny the existence of what's happened, nor submit meekly to its weight, as though everything in fact that happened could not have happened otherwise. You know, her message seems to be that in order to try and explain why the Holocaust occurred, historians have sort of made it seem inevitable, and she wants to clearly say no, it's not inevitable. And I'm presuming, although I haven't gotten far enough into the book yet, that she's going to say that there was a great level of choice in what happened. I do find that really, really interesting. In the end of the chapter I've just read, she said, caution in handling generally accepted opinions that claim to explain whole trends of history is especially important for the historian of modern times. And that's certainly something that I would agree with. I love the idea of history as a narrative. It's something that never occurred to me until I was sort of in my 20s, and read a couple of really interesting books by people like Hayden White, where he talks about, you know, history basically being a fictive thing that we've just sort of made up because we're interpreting things to our own liking. You know, we're making the facts fit. You know, there is no truth, which people, you know, is not nice. And obviously we do need to have a certain level of exploration into why things happened, but I think Hannah Arendt's coming down firmly on the idea that we can't say for certain why things happened, and when we do say that, we sort of almost, oh, we've tied the bow on that, let's put that aside. So I get the feeling that's where this is going, and I love that that's where it's going, but obviously there's a lot of book left. So, and then I started Becoming. So I was really excited to get this book. I didn't know what to expect because I didn't know what Michelle Obama's writing style would be. I'm not naive enough to assume that she would have written it unaided, but maybe she did. It's any time I read a book that's not by an actual author, I kind of am suspicious. So I include everybody in that. Hillary Clinton, Busy Phillips, the whole lot. You know, obviously she sat down and related this story, presumably penned it, but I didn't know how it was going to come across. You never know. Because I love her so much, I didn't want it to be... I knew it wouldn't be bad, but I didn't want it to be okay. And it's not just okay, it's awesome. So there's some really interesting insights. You just feel like she's talking to you. And in fact, a couple of people have said to me that you should hear the audio. And you know, I'm so behind on audiobooks. I've never listened to an audiobook. I've said that here before. And this is definitely one of the ones where I missed a treat, because that would have been awesome to have her read that. She's got some brilliant turns of phrase that just feel so natural. She talks, she goes into all sorts of things. So I'm right back in her childhood at the moment, and she's talking about her school, that there's a terrible article comes out in the Chicago Defender, basically saying that it's a rundown slum with a ghetto mentality. And her head teacher, Dr. Levizzo, hits back with a letter to the editor, sort of defending his school. And she says, it's clear from his letter that he understood precisely what he was up against. Failure is a feeling long before it becomes an actual result. I just love that. It's so true. It really, really is. It's vulnerability that breeds with self-doubt and then is escalated, often deliberately, by fear, which is absolutely bang on. Then she also says, there's a lovely, lovely bit at the beginning. There's lovely stories in here, but there's a lovely bit at the beginning where she's learning to play piano, and she's learnt on a really beaten up piano that has chips in the keys. And when she has to give a piano recital and she's trying to play, I think it's a grand piano that's brand spanking new in this auditorium, she can't find middle C because it doesn't have a chip on the keys. And her auntie, or great auntie, Robbie, who has taught her piano, comes up out of the audience to show her where middle C is. And she says, maybe she understood my shock. Maybe she knew that the disparities of the world had just quietly shown themselves to me for the first time. It's just little things like that that are really awesome. So I'm only 60 pages in, but I think it's really, really good. And I can't wait to finish it. What I've got is a quandary now, because I have a train journey tomorrow, and I love, love, love train journeys. Brilliant time to read. But I've then got a whole sort of 6 hours out in Cardiff with my girlfriends, which I never do. We're not drinking or anything. I know the Wales game is on, rugby, for those of you that don't know. But we're just going because it's my friend's birthday, my friend Francesca. So I don't know what to take, because I don't think I can haul this around on a train and through Cardiff. I think that's going to drive me a bit nuts. Similarly, I don't think I can haul that about. should I take Lynette Roberts, which I know I won't be able to finish, or, she says, diving in and blocking the camera view completely, should I take something little like So Many Books? Because I could fit, but then this is the danger. What if, because the rugby is on, if you're not familiar with, I mean, you all must have your own versions of this, but when the rugby is on in Cardiff, it is just chock-a-block, and they have to put all these extra barriers up for people to actually get the train. So you can genuinely end up standing there for hours before you even get on a train, and then you're like this, completely rammed. What if I'm stuck for hours and then I finish this? I don't know what to do. So I'm done with that. I was going to just, this was going to be a short video because I didn't read that much, I was going to use the extra few minutes to just chat briefly just about my studies, because I had a couple of questions on my thread, and I've had a couple of questions on Instagram about a couple of times I've mentioned university and what did I do. So it really makes no bearing on my reading, but if you're interested, I was in university as a mature student. I went to Sussex University when I was, I think I must have been 23 or 22, and I did politics, brilliant, that's a good start. I did politics, can't even say it, and philosophy, if you can believe that. But I did it for 1 year and then I dropped out. Well, I transferred, but that's the same thing. I love the philosophy, but it turns out I just don't have that sort of head for anything sciencey, and politics is massively sciencey. You're remembering tons of dates, tons of factual information, and I just couldn't get my head around it. So I switched, and I switched to English literature, which is what everyone said I should have done in the first place. Hate it when people are right. And then I did a year of that at Sussex University, which was awesome. It's a really good university, but I just missed Wales so much. And I'd been living in Sussex for like 5 years, I think, at that point. We'd moved away when I was 18 from Wales, and I just wanted to come home, was basically it. And I began what I term as the diaspora back to Wales, because we'd all left Wales when I was 18. God knows why, it's a long story. And then I came back to do the second year of my English degree, and then my parents moved back, and now we're just waiting for my sister. So I didn't realise at the time when I signed up for university that I would be in university for 10 years. I didn't know that was going to happen, or more or less 10 years. What happened was then is after I'd done my degree, I decided to do a PhD. But because I skipped my MA, which sounds really, really like arrogant, but I was encouraged to do it because I had a really fun idea for a PhD. I kind of missed out on a lot of funding pots because they wanted you to have an MA as well in order to apply for funding for a PhD. I mean, it makes total sense. Why would you give someone money to do a PhD when you don't even know if they can do an extended piece of writing like an MA? So basically, it all just went wrong, and I ran out of money. I don't know how many times. I ended up sabotaging myself by forgetting to fill in the one form that actually somebody was giving me money, and I missed their funding that year and had to just find like $4,000 out of nowhere. I know, by the way, I know this is nothing compared to the fees you guys have in America, but it was a lot to me at the time. So yeah, so I through blood, sweat and tears, I finished my PhD. I got it officially when Idris was a baby. I did the last Viva session, which is when you have a session with your sort of examiners really, and you justify it verbally what you've done. And I had that when I was about, I think I was about 6 months pregnant. I can't quite remember. It was all a bit of a blur. Yeah, so just terrible, terrible idea to have done it. And it was in Native American writing. So Native American writers who write in English and Welsh writers who write in English. So it was talking about, why would you choose those two topics? I don't know. It was talking about when you use English to talk about your nation, your identity, your ethnicity. And actually English is the very thing that is part of the colonising process. So obviously for Native Americans that is very relevant. In Wales, it's a totally different ballgame, but it was interesting to compare the two. If you manage to stay listening through all of that, I'm massively impressed because I start to bore myself. But that is it in a nutshell. So I like a lot of Welsh writers. I like a lot of Native American writers, but I haven't read them in years because it kind of throws me back to that horrible period where I, tortured myself by never actually ever writing on time. yeah, the nice part of that story is that the gentleman I phoned when I was trying to transfer my degree to Swansea was a gentleman called Daniel Williams, and he was in charge of admissions. So I had to talk to him on the phone. I don't think it was for long, 10 minutes, and I had to justify why I wanted to change universities. And what I didn't know at the time was that he would become my PhD supervisor, and he would actually marry me and my husband, because I managed to convince him to be the officiator of our wedding. So all those years later, he was stood before me and my husband on this amazing mountain backdrop behind us, asking me, "Do you, Charlotte, take this man?" So yeah, that's quite nice. Okay, I'm going to go now because I'm definitely over 10 minutes, but I hope you have a lovely weekend, and after this train journey, hopefully I will have read something. I'll see you soon. Bye.